Sorry, guys, brief re-intro.
So delegation is extremely close to me. And because I have a personal story that in regards to delegation, and I'm glad that Scott Grondin and H are here to hear this because they're an integral part of the delegation story. I learned delegation through the School of Hard Knocks. Took over our first gas station in my late 20s with my twin brother. We had no idea what delegation was. We just got handed the keys on Labor Day, and we went in and just did what we knew to do, and that's start to get dirty. So we started cleaning bathrooms. Along that time, let's fast forward. Craig and I would be getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to be hitting the gas station by 4, because we were the guys that started cooking the breakfast. We had a deli inside the gas station, so we took it upon ourselves to put out 150 burritos, breakfast burritos, and then get ready for lunch with another 150 burritos that we would sell during the day. So our day started around 4 a.m. and it would never end, because there would be times where graveyard shift. I got the call one time where they ran out of pennies and I had to go. I had to take the call, or some emergencies. So 5 years goes by. H is working with us now, and Craig and I did everything. We did the deli, we cooked the food, we did the banking, we did the cleaning, we did the stocking, we did cashiering, we did really almost literally everything in the store. We were working in the business 100%. It got to the time where we had 2 or 3 gas stations now, and I'd have to have a meeting at our small little corporate office with my older brother, and he'd say, he'd call me, he'd be like, "Where are you?" I'd say, "I'm sorry, I'm late. I'm banking, I'm cashiering, we're packed." "So what do you mean where I am? I'm working." And it started to get painful for my brother, because I was becoming a flake, because I couldn't make meetings that were scheduled, and everyone started to be affected. At this point, Trevor, my older brother, knew Scott Grondin, and through a different side of a relationship. Scott Grondin was a business coach, and Trevor said, "Scott, we need you, because my brothers are overwhelmed, and we need to start learning about this concept that Scott told me for the first time, how to work on the business instead of in the business." And along that time, we've been developing H. H had been working with us for a couple of years now, and we're trying to get him to really take on the ownership of the gas station, but I was too scared to let it go, because this was my baby for 5 years. I knew exactly how it to be done. And so every time H wanted to make a decision, I would always come behind him and want to override the decision, or input myself into the decision. Got to the point, I remember it very vividly, H, we're kind of in the sales floor of Ventura Market. And I remember our conversation like it was yesterday. And this has been at least a decade ago now, more so, maybe 14 years ago. H is like, "Mark, please let me make some decisions." And I had this struggle of letting go of my little baby. Anyway, after that discussion and a couple mishaps of wanting to take back control, I gave H control, delegated pretty much all the duties inside the gas station. And little did I know that H does a better job at the tasks than I ever did. And I never would have done that, because I was so scared to let go. And so that was my, and through Scott Grondin teaching me how business works and how to grow a business instead of working in the business. Because H was so adamant about me delegating everything to him, and Scott Grondin teaching me what it means to work on the business instead of in the business. This is why we're here today. 35 sites, pretty much decentralized, all delegation to all of you guys. You're making every decision. It was an integral part of time, because we had a couple gas stations, and it was just about the time that we exploded into Clean Freak, and then now Watershed, which is 50 car washes later. And so it was absolutely germane that we learn the art of delegation to get where we are today. So this is why we're talking about this subject now.
Yeah, Mark, it's an important topic, and managers bring it up all the time, and usually in the form of a review, or they're usually overworked, or they're tired, or they're frustrated. And I'll tell you a quick story. Back when Justin had just started with us, that we had a manager, one of his sites, his name was Nick, and he just had a great heart for people. And Steven was also working at the site, and Steven was learning sales, and we got Steven showing up every day in a new shirt. He was ironing the shirt every day. And Nick was really mechanically minded, not management minded, but mechanically minded, but his heart was in the right spot. And every time the tunnel went down, which it did often at these remodeled sites in the early days, Nick was like, I don't want Steven to have to fix the tunnel at all. I'm going to jump in and repair it and do all the work. And man, it was because I need Steven to sell and I want him to be ready. I don't want him getting dirty and sweaty. And it was super hot here in Arizona and in the middle of summer. And Nick would just jump in and fix the tunnel. And then one day the tunnel went down when he was away, or he was off, and they called him and he's like, I just came down and fixed it. And that was great. He had the heart of a servant. He's like, Scott, it was no big deal. I'm 5 minutes away. I could just do it. I didn't want those guys to get dirty. And then Nick got a girlfriend and they went to the movies. And all of a sudden he gets a call in the middle of the movies, the tunnel's down, and he has to leave the movies. He has to leave his girlfriend there, and he runs and he fixes the tunnel, and he comes back and he's smelly and he's stinky and he's dirty. And she's like, this is a heck of a date. And that's where the breakdown happened. He's like, he took the heart of serving people, and then he didn't take it on to delegation. And like, now it's affecting what he was super good at, starting to affect it all. And the reason when you talk to Nick, he's like, man, if I delegate then and how to put the tunnel back together, and maybe you guys can relate, then why do you need me? If everyone else can put the tunnel back together, why do you need me? And so then there's lies around this delegation, and Mark, we can discuss this too, but that's a big one. And we've had that conversation with a lot of guys from the top down, starting with Vince, man. I remember those days. If everyone else could do the repairs, why do you need me? If everyone else could do the hiring, why do you need me? And so how do you, Mark, what's your thought on that one lie of delegation?
Can we start with the definition as well on delegation, so
Yeah,
that we're clear in what we're talking about when we mean delegation? And delegation is the act of redirecting tasks and initiatives to other team members.
Say it again.
It's the act of redirecting tasks and initiatives to other team members.
Yep. So like
And that's
repairing the
what we're
top.
talking about.
Yeah.
And yeah, for sure, the lies, right? That they're not going to need me. The lie of I'm not going to get the glory anymore. The lie of I can do it better and quicker. Those are all just lies, right? You can accomplish more with the team than you can accomplish with an individual. Very important, right? We become way better when you've delegated tasks to the team. There's a couple of reasons, right? It'll prevent, like Scott Grondin was talking about with Nick. Nick ultimately, after taking on the heart of wanting to take on everything, he started to get burned out because he was the only guy that knew how to repair the tunnel. And that's not good. And then to Scott's point again, Nick was being overworked because not only was Nick working his shifts, but now he's coming in all the time with the tunnel breaking down, and he started suffering burnout and being overworked. So that's the reason we want to redirect activities and initiatives to other team members.
So Mark, what about this thought is I could do it better myself? And so we've always taught, yes, that's true. You can do it better and you can do it faster. I think there's some truth there, but it will lead to some burnout. So when you think about delegation on a task, and we could talk in a few moments about what tasks you can delegate or should be delegated, but look at it like this. If the current employee knows nothing, but he could do 60% as good as you, I would say you should delegate it 100% of the time. So if they could do 60% as good as you, even though it takes them longer to do it and it's not as well, you should delegate that task to them. And we could talk about kind of how you do delegation as well. So be considering that when you're looking at the teammates. Man, I could do repairs and maintenance faster. but I want to train these guys and bring them into the fold. And what happened too with when Nick was gone, another part of that story is when Nick was off site, it created anxiety for the rest of the team, because if the tunnel went down, now I had to deal with a whole new set of problems. I wasn't trained, I wasn't empowered to jump in. Once everyone got trained on rebuilding the conveyor themselves, the level of anxiety went away. They felt more engaged, they felt more connected, they felt more better trained, part of the team, and they liked their job more. The anxiety went away.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think one of the main reasons people don't want to assign tasks is, we covered a couple of them, but it takes time to teach people. And I think that's a big reason we don't want to do it, because it takes time. But the time measured between teaching somebody a task and then the task ultimately not being yours, it's not that you're wasting time or that it takes time. You are saving yourself so much time in the future. And guess what? You also get to do, you get to empower the people that are working with you. Who doesn't want to be empowered in their job, right? People just show up and work and then they go home. That can get a little mundane. But when you start to empower people, get over yourself, and you have people engaged in some tasks, which we'll talk about, that you can delegate, people feel empowered. And that's what we're hoping for, people to be engaged in their work.
Yeah. So here's a couple thoughts. You guys can jot these down. If you want the job done right, then delegate do it the right way. So Mark just talked about it. It takes time to delegate. And so let's just take you're going to train someone on how to do the schedule, a new employee or a new assistant manager. And Dan, when's the schedule due? Let's just say it's Friday, or is it Thursday by?
Yeah, it's typically Friday by 10, but people get it in by Thursday and Friday.
So let's just say it's due Friday at 10. So you would sit down and say, hey, I'm going to train you Thursday, and we're going to spend 2 hours. It should take you an hour to do the schedule. We're going to spend about 2 hours to do that. So set aside some time to do proper training. You don't just want to delegate that. Hey, you're in charge of the schedule, have it tomorrow, right? So you set it around, good time to do it. And then you're going to find the right person. First of all, Mark mentioned this, yesterday talking to him, he's like, make sure you find the right person who's capable of doing the schedule, who likes using Excel and can use the computer and likes being organized and likes that type of process, right? Years ago, we gave someone the chance to be a manager, and we found out later that they didn't know how to use Excel. They didn't know how to use the computer at all, like literally how to type. It was just like we delegated the task, where we found out we had the wrong person doing it. Explain the why. The third thing is explain the why we should do this task correctly, right? A lot of times we're delegating tasks and they don't really understand why they should do it and why it makes a bigger impact in the training, the development, and the overall part of the company. So the reason we want this done, consistency, it's part of our cultural concepts, is we want it done by Friday at 10 every week. People can plan their schedule, plan their weeks, and they know where they're at, right? And then the number 4, make sure we do follow-up meetings. Hey, before we publish it, we're meeting tomorrow at 8. So we met Thursday for 2 hours. We're meeting tomorrow at 8. That gives us time to look at the work you've done and to follow up. And that's the key part of delegation, is the follow-up. All right. And then I would encourage you're delegating the task, not the exact procedure. Just because you lay out your schedule this way doesn't mean that's how it has to be done. You just want to say, here's the deadline, here's how we do it. And then they can kind of move these puzzle pieces around to make sure they hit those deadlines. So those are the 5 things on how to train delegation and how to process that.
Hey, Grondin, can you just repeat, just in case everybody missed one and they can write down their notes?
Yeah. So set aside good time. Number 1, be patient. Okay. Make sure you're training the right person that's capable of doing the job. Okay. Explain the why behind it, why this is part of the overall process. Make sure you do a follow-up meeting with them, either to review the task or to see how they've done. And then you want to just finally delegate the task, not the procedure. Okay.
Yes. And to Scott's point there, one very key thing to remember as well as you delegate the task, it doesn't mean you are delegating the responsibility. Ultimately, the manager is responsible for every task getting done. So make sure you're not throwing the person who you've delegated a task to under the bus and point the finger. Well, they didn't do it. It's why it's not done. Remember, it's still your responsibility, manager, that the task gets done. So it just might be a training. And then one last thing I love Scott's points, the 5 points there. And then, boy, they need credit. Give them credit and praise after you verify that the task was done, that you delegated them. Because then they know that, oh man, this guy's looking at what I'm doing. Can you imagine delegating the task and never following up to see if it was done? Oh boy, you'll ruin them. So give lots of praise after it's done right.
Mark, when you made that phrase, I think of, we often delegate and we expect the employee to be the mind reader. You should just know what's happening in my mind. And we don't communicate correctly because we don't set aside the appropriate amount of time to really train. And we just assume they know. Don't forget, we've had 10 years, 15 years of car washing experience. And this new employee's only been with us for 90 days or 6 months. And so we expect them to be a mind reader. So we got to be careful with that. And then, Mark and I, we always talk about this idea of what's the difference between delegating a task and abdicating a task. And I think it's a clear, I don't know if you guys have heard of this word abdicating before, but you've all heard of delegating. I'm moving in a task to someone. Part of the delegating, as Mark just talked about, is the follow-up. If you abdicate a task to someone, you've given them a task, but you're saying, I don't want to be in the information loop again. Right. And so we've delegated management of our sites to you guys. We haven't abdicated it because we still want to be in the communication loop. Right. And we're in the communication loop by looking at your financials, by looking at your daily reports, by reading what's happening on Slack, by doing site reviews, site inspections. So understand the difference. We're delegating the task of managing staff, managing our car washes to you and your teams, but we haven't abdicated it. Right. So we want to stay part of that and be careful. You guys doing the same. Go ahead, Mark.
We're here right now, right in the manager meetings. We want to be involved on the ground level with you guys.
But
I don't mean to interrupt. What does abdicate mean?
Abdicating means you're delegating a task without follow-up, and you're saying, I don't want to be in the loop anymore. Okay.
And just to be clear, Grondin, this is something that we should never have at the site level. Like a site manager shouldn't delegate any or advocate anything that they're like, oh, no, I don't have to worry about that anymore. That's now my S1's responsibility. That's my assistant manager. Exactly. Typically, everything at the site is under a delegation basis, and it's not a pass, and then I don't have to worry about that anymore.
And you'll see that with managers. They'll be like, what happened? And they'll just kind of shrug their shoulders. Like, I don't know. They say they delegated it, but what they're saying is I've abdicated that the morning maintenance to someone else because I'm not doing the follow-up. I'm not checking in on them. And so really by avoiding the one of the key parts of delegating is the follow-up. Right. And so be careful of that. Oh, I trained them 1 or 2 times and they're good to go. I never have to follow up again. And that's never the task of delegating. So I just want to make sure there's a distinction there. Great question, Austin.
Should we talk about real quickly? I like the example that Justin had yesterday. You want to talk about what can be delegated?
Yeah, let's do that.
Justin, just give that little story because it's a good story as an example, right?
Yeah, I love it. So we've always said, just as the example, back when I was running a site, anytime someone would come to me and say, hey, I want to be a manager, like they're probably 30 days in and they're like gung-ho and like, hey, give me more responsibilities. And they have like these high aspirations. I would go, awesome. Like I've got the perfect thing for you. And it's the vending machine. And you are going to be responsible for this vending machine. It's a seemingly small task. And your role over the next 90 days is going to be taking care of this thing. You need to make sure it's all the vending supplies are ordered. There's no open rows. The thing needs to be sparkling and clean. The glass needs to be wiped down. Sides need to be polished. The cash needs to be emptied out. This is going to be your job. And people that weren't really serious, they would go, well, it's just a vending machine. Like I want more. And it would lead to this conversation where if you can't be trusted with something small and to manage something small, how can we trust you to manage something big, like a $6 million car wash? And what they would have to do is start thinking about it. So the people that were serious would think about, okay, today this vending machine looks good, but I'm off tomorrow and I'm off the next day. So I need to stuff this thing full. I need to be wiping this down. I need to be calling, hey guys, make sure, it's looking great tomorrow. Make sure it gets wiped down in the morning, and then follow up as soon as you get back. And so you would see who could do a good job in managing little, and then you just give them a little bit more to manage. But it was the perfect first thing. It's a perfect thing to delegate to someone who is like a shift supervisor, like an S1, and really see how they would do it. As I would come in, I'd check in on them throughout the process, like what Grondin was saying, and I'd grab them, I'd go, hey, let's go walk. Let's go take a look at the vending machine. And I'd point out the areas that they're doing well, or if there were areas that they were missing, I'd say, but hey, that's okay. We still got time, and it's still yours. And it would be, I just remember there was always, I don't know, whenever you find something, it's so good, like just grabbing someone under your arm and looking at it together and just point out what you see. But it was really good. Yeah.
Thanks, Justin. Shall we talk about some other tasks that can be delegated?
Yeah, talk about what can I delegate? What should I delegate?
I think a key thing to remember, maybe an important task that we can delegate, is things that are recurring, recurring tasks. What did I wrote? Did I have another reason?
Recurring and in their skill set.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Dan.
Pleasure.
Recurring tasks. So tasks that are going to happen over and over and over again are great for delegating. And tasks that you've identified a couple of key faithful team members, and you kind of know their skill set, their bents, what they're naturally good, that what God just gifted them that way. Those are great tasks to delegate as well. So recurring and tasks that fit a faithful team member's bent or strength.
Yeah.
So the recurring was for what Justin was doing with the vending machine. That was a consistent weekly thing that it'd be something you can measure the whole way through.
Yep.
Instead of it being sporadic and maybe he missed it and it's recurring. It's going over and over.
Scheduling.
I was thinking, Mark, the MTOs, you could there's 13 things on the MTOs to do every day. Some of those you could delegate, some of those you can't, but you have to make sure the entire MTO process is done. It doesn't mean every one of those tasks you have to do. And I think a lot of managers no, this is the manager's outline. It is, you have to make sure it's done and completed and in the binder. It doesn't mean you have to fill out the paperwork or do every one of those tasks. Some of those tasks, like the banking, might be only for you, right? But I would some of the other tasks, you could definitely have other people do it and then just go through the process and follow up. Hey, when you walk the site, when you watch the cars go through, what did you see? What do we need to correct, right? So don't abdicate those tasks, but delegate the task. Oxman had a good point on delegation. He was just listening in. You want to share it?
How's it going, Team Watershed?
What's up?
So I heard Grondin and Mark mention, when you are delegating, to discuss and make clear the deadline. And one thing I learned from Grondin, and if anyone has worked with me that I've delegated to, you guys know this is something I like to practice, and that's to have buy-in from the person that you're delegating to on what that deadline is. So there's shared expectations. So Grondin, myself, will always ask, when do you think you can get that done by? And have them, give you a deadline or a timeline. So it's a shared expectation that they've bought into. So if they don't hit it, you kind of eliminate that scenario where they're like, well, I didn't say I can get it done in that time. That was, you thought I can get it done in that time.
And if you can't make that deadline, call me before that deadline hits. Say
Right.
I'm off schedule. Then you can help them through that.
Yeah. And if they've laid out the deadline, or at least have bought into the deadline, there's a much higher probability that they'll hit it.
Great point.
Love it. When I think you've become a really good delegator, you can leave your teams for 30 days and they'll be just fine without you. That's a job well done when that happens.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, I was thinking, and we talk about it often, any topic like this, does the Bible ever talk about delegation? What's your, you always go to the Bible on all these big issues. What's the Bible talk about?
I love it. It's great teaching on, we're Scott and I are talking, hey, what does the Bible say about delegation? I just like the teachings because they're old and they're timeless. And I can't believe we went over one this morning in our Wednesday morning Bible study here at Watershed. And it was like, hey, these things you've heard from me, entrust these to faithful men who will teach others also. Man, is that great wisdom. So find faithful men and women. So you've heard the things, right? You've heard about delegation. Now go practice it yourself, and then go find faithful men and women that can put that into practice and then teach others also. Can you imagine that you learn the art of delegation, you tell somebody else who starts teaching somebody about delegation, and then they start learning delegation? Oh man, we can go to 500 sites then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of one verse that comes to mind.
Really, for me, it jumps out at that verse. It's the teaching part of the delegation. I think we forget about that. Our job as managers is to be have the love of a teacher's heart, right? And be patient. That's why that first thing I told you is be patient with people, because they don't get it. They're 60% as strong as you right now, but they'll soon be 100% or even 110% as good as you are now, which is humbling. Yeah. So good. All right, Dan, do you have any questions?
Dan, can I say something real quick? Dave Ramsey has a quote. He says, delegation requires the willingness to pay for short-term failure for long-term competency. And I think, Mark, you gave our example at the beginning. I think that's what it is, right? It's you're afraid to have this short-term failure. If I delegate this out and they don't do it the right way, maybe deadlines don't get done. So whatever it is, you decide, okay, I'm not going to delegate. But to not give that up means you can't ever truly grow. So willingness, it requires a willingness to pay for short-term failures for long-term gain or competency.
Love that.
So good. That reminds me of what Mark was talking about before. Like, if Mark never let go of Ventura to you, guess where Mark would probably still be? We wouldn't have Watershed. I don't know, who knows what the future would have been, but he still would have been holding his baby so close. And then, but as soon as he was able to let go and put us all into this mentality, as soon as we can let go and start focusing on the business, not in it, that how could you guys get? How can you get better by being able to have less of your hold on your baby? And that where we went from there is pretty special.
Hey, Mark, we used to do all these manager meetings on Wednesdays here, and aren't they so much better now that we've delegated into Dan and Justin?
life is sweet.
It's like all that work. It's like, you guys, we delegated it. Or like, you guys just show us the agenda the day before.
And boy, do they do a good job or what? I think these are two guys that are doing 110% of what we used to do.
We should have done this 2015.
Very kind. Thanks, guys.
Good job.
But you guys, I'm sure, Grondin, there had to be a moment though, and Mark, and I'm sure there's times where I bet you just want to like stand up and be like, Dan, oh yeah, I know you. Call me. And it's because you guys, that's where we got our knowledge from and our wisdom from, and then you guys trust us to pass it on. And once again, we're very grateful for the delegation.
We had a lot of meetings after the meetings, didn't we, Dan, with you?
Oh yeah, too fun. Yeah. So anything else, guys? We want to open up the floor. They've given out their notes. They've done it, but now let's open up some questions, because there has to be something that's perked up in someone's mind, and let's air it out if anybody has a question.
So we got one question. Oh,
I got this quote from Craig Rochelle that he has in one of his podcasts that is titled "Becoming a Leader That People Love to Follow." He says, the best leaders unleash higher performance through empowerment, not through command and control. You can have control or you can have growth. You cannot have both. Don't just delegate tasks. That only creates followers. Delegate authority. That creates leaders. And it's fits perfectly for everything you laid out.
Mason, can you send that to all managers? All of us are in that chat and Slack. Please send it out.
Good.
Fire.
You should have just read that at the beginning. We could have saved a half an
I
hour
know.
here.
What are we doing? These meetings would get really short.
That was that was an amazing bottom line. I agree wholeheartedly with everything you said there.